The hum of the old refrigerator was the only sound interrupting the silent vigil of midnight. Sarah, a brilliant architect with a mind that could sculpt cities from thin air, stared at the blank CAD screen, a single unrendered beam mocking her ambition. Another deadline loomed, another night bled into dawn, and the intricate skyscraper design, a project meant to elevate her career, remained stubbornly unfinished. This wasn't a new phenomenon. It was a recurring nightmare, a silent, insidious pattern that had ghosted through her life for years. From academic papers left until the 11th hour to relationships sabotaged by a sudden, inexplicable withdrawal, Sarah was intimately familiar with the cold grip of self-sabotage. She knew the mechanics of architecture, the physics of stress and strain, but the internal architecture of her own behavior remained an enigma. If you, like Sarah, have ever felt the invisible pull of self-sabotage, the inexplicable urge to undermine your own success, then this journey into the hidden patterns of the human mind is for you. Consider subscribing to Invisible Patterns for more deep dives into the psychology that shapes our lives. The question that haunted Sarah, and indeed countless others, was not what she was doing, but why. Why, when success seemed within reach, did an invisible hand seem to snatch it away? Why did the most promising endeavors often crumble at the precipice of completion? This isn't about weakness of will or a lack of intelligence. It's about something far more subtle, far more deeply ingrained. It is about a hidden pattern, a psychological blueprint that dictates our choices, often without our conscious awareness. To understand this, we must first journey into the labyrinth of the past, into the formative years where these patterns are often etched. Imagine a young child, perhaps 5 years old, named Ethan. Ethan is a bright, energetic boy, eager to please. One afternoon, he proudly presents a drawing to his mother, a vibrant, if slightly abstract, depiction of their family home. His mother, overwhelmed by a stressful day, glances at it, offers a perfunctory, "That's nice, dear," and returns to her tasks. Later that week, Ethan builds an elaborate tower of blocks. His father, distracted by a phone call, praises him with an absent-minded "Good job, son," without truly engaging. These seem like minor incidents, fleeting moments in a childhood. But for Ethan, a sensitive and perceptive child, these moments begin to weave a subtle narrative. He learns implicitly that his efforts, his creations, are not truly seen or valued. His intrinsic desire for recognition, for connection through his achievements, goes unmet. Now let's fast forward 20 years. Ethan is now a talented and innovative software developer. He is on the verge of launching an innovative application, a project to which he has dedicated countless hours. The launch date approaches, and suddenly, Ethan finds himself riddled with doubt. He starts to pick apart his code, finding flaws where none truly exist. He delays meetings, misses crucial deadlines, and begins to isolate himself from his team. His application, once a source of immense pride, now feels like a burden, an impending failure. This isn't a conscious decision to fail. It's an unconscious reenactment of that early pattern, the fear that his efforts, no matter how brilliant, will ultimately be met with indifference or worse, criticism. The invisible pattern whispers, "Why bother? It won't be enough anyway." This phenomenon, this recurring narrative of self-sabotage, often stems from what psychologists call core beliefs. These are fundamental assumptions we hold about ourselves, others, and the world, formed during our early experiences. For Ethan, the core belief might be, "My efforts are not truly valued." For Sarah, the architect, the core belief might be, "I am not worthy of sustained success." These beliefs, though often unconscious, act as powerful internal scripts, guiding our decisions and reactions. They are the invisible threads that pull us toward familiar, albeit often painful outcomes. Consider the intricate dance of attachment styles. Early childhood experiences with caregivers shape how we perceive and interact in relationships. A child who experiences inconsistent care, where affection is offered sporadically and unpredictably, might develop an anxious attachment style. As an adult, this individual might crave intimacy, but simultaneously push it away, fearing abandonment. They might become overly critical of partners or provoke arguments, subconsciously testing the limits of their partner's devotion, fulfilling an unconscious prophecy of being left alone. The pattern repeats, the desire for closeness, followed by behaviors that ultimately create distance. The invisible script dictates, if I get too close, I will be hurt. The human brain, in its infinite complexity, is a master of efficiency. It loves patterns. Once a neural pathway is forged, whether through repeated action or strong emotional experiences, it becomes easier to traverse. These pathways, often laid down in childhood, become our default routes. When faced with a new challenge or opportunity, our brains, seeking efficiency, often default to these familiar, albeit sometimes detrimental, patterns. For Sarah, the blank CAD screen was a trigger. It activated the deeply ingrained pattern of avoidance, the fear of not being good enough, the expectation of failure. Her brain, in an attempt to protect her from perceived pain, would guide her toward procrastination, toward the familiar comfort of the unfinished. The insidious nature of these patterns lies in their invisibility. We rarely consciously choose to procrastinate or self-sabotage. Instead, we experience it as a sudden lack of motivation, a wave of inexplicable anxiety, or a compelling urge to do anything but the task at hand. Sarah would find herself meticulously cleaning her apartment, scrolling endlessly through social media, or even starting new, less important projects, all while the skyscraper design languished. These are not signs of laziness. They are symptoms of a deeper, internal conflict. The conscious mind desires success, but the unconscious mind, driven by these hidden patterns, seeks to maintain a deeply ingrained, albeit maladaptive, sense of safety or familiarity. This internal conflict is often fueled by what psychologists term secondary gains. While self-sabotage might seem purely detrimental, it often offers subtle, unconscious benefits. For instance, by procrastinating, Sarah avoids the potential criticism of her design. If she never finishes, she can never truly fail. The fear of failure, or the fear of success itself, can be a powerful driver of these patterns. Success can be terrifying because it brings increased visibility, higher expectations, and the potential for greater scrutiny. For some, the comfort of mediocrity, or even outright failure, offers a strange, perverse sense of security. It aligns with their core belief of not being worthy, thus reinforcing the pattern. Another key component is the concept of avoidance. We avoid discomfort, pain, and uncertainty. When a task or goal triggers deeply rooted fears or anxieties, our natural inclination is to avoid it. Procrastination is a prime example of an avoidance strategy. By delaying, we temporarily escape the discomfort associated with the task. However, this avoidance is a double-edged sword. While it offers temporary relief, it ultimately amplifies the underlying anxiety and reinforces the pattern. The more we avoid, the stronger the avoidance habit becomes, creating a vicious cycle. Sarah knew the anxiety of the looming deadline, but the anxiety of starting felt even more overwhelming. So, she avoided. The social context in which we operate also plays a crucial role. Consider Mark, a brilliant artist, whose parents, though loving, subtly discouraged his artistic pursuits in favor of a more stable career. Mark, now in his 30s, finds himself repeatedly abandoning promising art projects just before they gain traction. He might develop a sudden creative block, or lose interest, or find a seemingly valid reason to put the project aside. Unconsciously, he is honoring the unspoken expectations of his parents, fulfilling a pattern of not pursuing his true passion. His self-sabotage is a silent internal rebellion against his own desires, a way to maintain a perceived connection, however tenuous, to his early caregivers' expectations. The invisible pattern here is one of loyalty, an unconscious deference to ingrained familial dynamics. The journey to understanding and ultimately disrupting these patterns begins with awareness. It's about shining a light into the shadowed corners of our own minds. Sarah, after years of this repeating cycle, finally sought help. She began to journal, to meticulously trace her thoughts and feelings leading up to moments of procrastination. She started to notice the subtle anxieties that arose when a project neared completion, the familiar whispers of, "What if it's not good enough?" or "They'll find out I'm a fraud." This wasn't about judgment, it was about observation. The process of deconstructing these patterns is not a quick fix. It's a gradual, often challenging excavation. It requires introspection, patience, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. One powerful tool is pattern interruption. Once Sarah identified the early signs of her procrastination pattern, the sudden urge to clean, the endless scrolling, she would consciously choose to interrupt it. Instead of reaching for her phone, she might stand up, walk around, or engage in a brief, mindful breathing exercise. The goal isn't to eliminate the urge entirely, but to create a small, deliberate pause, a moment of conscious choice where the automatic pattern can be broken. Another crucial step is to challenge our core beliefs. For Ethan, the belief that my efforts are not truly valued needed to be re-examined. This involved actively seeking out and internalizing positive feedback, no matter how small. It meant consciously acknowledging his own achievements, celebrating small victories, and allowing himself to feel pride in his work, even if external validation was absent. This is about rewriting the internal script, replacing old, limiting beliefs with new, empowering ones. It's a process of self-parenting, offering ourselves the validation and affirmation we may not have received in our formative years. The concept of re-parenting oneself is particularly potent in this context. Many self-sabotaging patterns are echoes of unmet childhood needs. By consciously providing ourselves with the understanding, compassion, and encouragement we lacked, we can begin to heal these old wounds. When Sarah felt the familiar wave of self-doubt, instead of berating herself, she learned to offer herself kindness. It's okay to feel this fear. You're doing your best. This gentle self-talk slowly began to chip away at the harsh internal critic that had fueled her procrastination for so long. The development of self-compassion is paramount. We are often our own harshest critics. When we fall into old patterns, the immediate reaction is often shame and self-blame. However, this only reinforces the negative cycle. Instead, practicing self-compassion involves treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a dear friend. It means acknowledging our struggles, accepting our imperfections, and recognizing that these patterns are not moral failings, but deeply ingrained psychological responses. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the willingness to embrace discomfort. Growth rarely happens within our comfort zones. To break free from self-sabotage, we must be willing to lean into the discomfort that arises when we challenge old patterns. For Sarah, this meant sitting with the anxiety of the unfinished design, allowing herself to feel the fear of judgment, and choosing to take one small step forward, even when every fiber of her being urged her to retreat. It was about choosing courage over comfort, even in the smallest of moments. The hidden patterns behind procrastination and self-sabotage are not insurmountable obstacles. They are intricate puzzles waiting to be solved. They are the invisible threads that, once illuminated, can be untangled and rewoven into a new tapestry of intentional choice and conscious action. Sarah, after months of diligent self-work, finally submitted her skyscraper design, not just on time, but with a renewed sense of confidence. The old hum of the refrigerator still punctuated her silent nights, but now the blank screen was replaced by the satisfying glow of a completed vision. The pattern wasn't entirely gone, but its grip had loosened. She had learned to recognize its whisper, and more importantly, how to choose a different path. The journey of self-discovery, of unraveling these invisible patterns is a lifelong endeavor. It requires vigilance, honesty, and a profound commitment to understanding the intricate workings of your own mind. If you're ready to peel back the layers of your own behavior to truly understand the why behind your choices, then join us on Invisible Patterns. Subscribe now and embark on a deeper exploration of the human psyche, uncovering the hidden forces that shape who you are and who you can become. The next episode of Invisible Patterns delves into the insidious nature of imposter syndrome, a phenomenon where individuals, despite objective evidence of their competence, persist in believing they are frauds and fear being exposed. This is not merely a lack of confidence, but a deeply ingrained pattern of self-doubt that often masquerades as humility. Consider Alex, a brilliant neurosurgeon who, after years of rigorous training and countless successful operations, still harbored a secret fear that he wasn't truly qualified. Every complex surgery, every groundbreaking medical paper published under his name only intensified the internal pressure. He would attribute his successes to luck, to the efforts of his team, or to simply having fooled everyone into believing he was more capable than he truly was. This self-sabotage manifested in subtle ways. He would meticulously over-prepare for every presentation, spending hours poring over details already mastered, driven by the fear of being caught unprepared. He would shy away from opportunities for advancement, convinced he would eventually be found out and his perceived inadequacy exposed. His brilliance was undeniable, yet his internal narrative constantly undermined it. The roots of imposter syndrome are often complex, often tracing back to childhood experiences. Perhaps Alex grew up in an environment where perfection was demanded, and any mistake, no matter how small, was met with disproportionate criticism. Or maybe he was constantly compared to a sibling or peer who was perceived as naturally gifted, leading him to believe his own achievements were always less significant, less authentic. These early experiences can hardwire a belief system that equates success with deception, creating a perpetual cycle of anxiety and self-doubt. Breaking free from the grip of imposter syndrome, much like overcoming procrastination, requires a conscious dismantling of these deeply ingrained patterns. For Alex, it involved a therapist who helped him identify the cognitive distortions at play. He learned to challenge the automatic negative thoughts that flooded his mind whenever he achieved something significant. Instead of immediately dismissing praise, he started to practice receiving it, allowing himself to acknowledge the validity of the compliment, even if only for a brief moment. He also began to keep a success journal, a deliberate act of documenting his achievements, not just the grand ones, but the small, everyday victories that he would typically overlook. This tangible record served as a counter-narrative to the internal voice that constantly whispered doubts. Another powerful tool in combating imposter syndrome is the concept of externalizing the inner critic. For many, the voice of self-doubt feels like an intrinsic part of who they are. By giving this voice a name, a persona separate from oneself, it becomes easier to challenge its pronouncements. Alex, with a wry smile, named his inner critic Dr. Doubter. When Dr. Doubter would chime in with pronouncements of inadequacy, Alex would mentally respond, "Thank you for your input, Dr. Doubter, but I'm going to choose to trust my skills on this one." This seemingly simple act of personification created a crucial distance, allowing him to observe and question the self-sabotaging thoughts rather than being consumed by them. The journey wasn't linear. There were days when Dr. Doubter's voice was deafening, when the fear of exposure felt overwhelming. But Alex learned to ride these waves of anxiety, understanding that these feelings were merely echoes of old patterns, not reflections of his current capabilities. He also discovered the power of vulnerability. Sharing his struggles with a trusted colleague, someone he deeply respected, was a monumental step. To his surprise, his colleague confessed to experiencing similar feelings, creating a sense of camaraderie and normalizing an experience Alex had long believed was uniquely his own. This act of sharing, of breaking the silence around his profound self-doubt, was incredibly liberating. The pursuit of understanding these invisible patterns is not about eradicating them entirely. It's about developing the awareness to recognize them, the tools to challenge them, and the resilience to choose a different response. It's about cultivating a more compassionate and realistic internal narrative. Just as Sarah learned to navigate the hum of her refrigerator and the blank screen, Alex learned to coexist with Dr. Doubter, allowing him to be a quiet observer rather than the conductor of his internal orchestra. At Invisible Patterns, we believe that true empowerment comes from understanding the subtle forces that shape our inner world. We invite you to join us next time as we explore the pervasive pattern of perfectionism, a seemingly virtuous trait that often becomes a powerful engine of self-sabotage, preventing us from starting, from finishing, and ultimately from truly experiencing the joy of creation. Until then, continue to observe, to question, and to gently challenge the invisible patterns that govern your own unique journey. Remember, the first step to changing a pattern is simply seeing it.